So Scott Kelly just under 2 weeks away from returning from his historic year-long stay on board the International Space Station, and a lot of people are going to be down there on the ground to help out once he comes home. And I'm joined now by one of those, Dr. Stevan Gilmore, who's the lead flight surgeon and has been for Scott for his entire mission. So Dr. Gilmore, first off, thanks so much for joining me today. It's always great to meet the people kind of behind the scenes making this all happen. And if I can, I want to jump right into it. So the landings in Kazakhstan are really dynamic. They're really interesting. Tell me a little bit about what that process is like on your end as a flight surgeon.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I would describe it as the definition of a whirlwind tour. We will be leaving about 7 days before landing to go over to Moscow, and we'll meet with some of the support team there and coordinate with our Russian colleagues who provide all the assets for landing. And about 3 days before landing, we travel with them to Kazakhstan and get in the posture for deployment. And on the day of the landing, we split up into two teams. There's a team that goes and supports a possible landing at a ballistic site, and then there's a larger team that goes to the primary landing site, and I'll be in the team at the primary landing site. And on the day of the landing, we deploy into groups on the helicopters that are provided and fly out to the landing site and are there to receive the crew.
Okay, and so as a flight surgeon, so there's a lot of folks, there's the search and recovery folks, there's a lot of people from the Russian forces, the NASA team. As a flight surgeon, what is your role once you're down on the ground and we have Scott out of the capsule?
So we do several things, but our main responsibility there is to be looking out for the health and well-being of the crew member. And so immediately after landing, we're there with the team, and we are typically there for the extraction of the crew members from the vehicle.
Okay.
And from that point forward, we're monitoring them, checking out their vital signs. They typically have a brief period in chairs out in front of the capsule, and they do a little bit of question and answer stuff with some of the folks that are there. And then after that, they set up a medical tent, and we take the crew members into there. Again, we're just making sure they're doing well, get them changed out of their spacesuits, and in that tent also we plan to perform some medical and science testing. After that's done, everyone gets back on the helicopters and returns to the airport in Karaganda for return to, in our case, we'll be coming back directly to the States, and the Russian crew members go back to Moscow.
Okay. Now, so Scott Kelly has been in space for almost 12 months now. Are you going to be doing anything special for his return as opposed to what you normally do for a, say, 6-month crew member?
So in general, it's a similar template. I think I'm kind of will compare it to his last stay on orbit, which was which I also had the good fortune to work with him on that. But so the science and the research questions are really paramount on this one-year mission. And in contrast to the last one, he'll be doing some blood collection, like not immediately before he gets on the vehicle to come home, but within a few hours of that. So we'll be getting a lot of data on the crew member. It's a little bit difficult to describe, but and when you're looking at a crew member, basically what there's a time pressure, because although you can't see it in most cases directly, what we're trying to capture is a snapshot of the crew's health, their capability and functioning, and that is a constantly changing picture, even though it's tough to view just from a person looking at them. But so we do that in a variety of ways, whether it's blood draws or sample collections or some of the functional testing that we do. That's what the main goal is.
So I wanted to get into that real quick. So you guys are going to be doing something with functional testing, really soon after, and I think we had talked to Julie Robinson a little bit about that. Can you expand upon that? Like, what are some of the tasks that Scott is going to be asked to do? And why are we doing these kind of tests?
That's a great question. there's a test that we ideally perform at the landing site in the tent, and it's called the functional field test. And the goal of this test is basically to obtain an assessment of what crews can perform.
Yeah.
So and the analogs for this are, we want to know quantitatively, or with some numbers, what kind of can they jump up and down, can they open hatches, could they do a spacewalk, or in the case that we're going to somewhere like Mars, can they go out right away and do spacewalks on the surface of that planet. And so what we do in the tent is, as I mentioned, we'll do a quick medical check on the crew member. We'll get them out of their spacesuits, and then they're instrumented with some really interesting technology, a lot of motion sensors on all their, like on their arms and legs and on their chest, and that allows us to do, with videography, we can sort of measure their ability to move and see how that's different relative to when they left. The other things that we're also monitoring closely are their heart rate response as we're having them do activities, and it's fairly straightforward activities. It's getting up quickly, it's changing positions, it's a mini obstacle course to see how their bodies tolerate navigating those
Something
things.
maybe not so hard when you've been down here the whole time, but when you've been coming back from microgravity, it can be a little bit difficult.
Absolutely. And again, this is part of that obtaining snapshots of the crew member's ability. We know we've done it multiple times before the flight in this case, and we'll do it after the flight. And it's to me, it's a real perhaps you'll have at one point an opportunity to maybe show the audience what the test is, but it's a real practical test, and I think it gives real valuable information.
Okay, and I mean, just one final thing. So once he's back in the country, you know, the rehab begins. What's kind of the rehab process look for a crew member, and is there going to be anything different about his, again, as opposed to what we normally do for folks?
So the typical process is we'll take pretty much a 20-hour flight back to Houston after landing, and we have this period where we call it the reconditioning period, and typically for a 6-month mission it lasts about 45 days, and there's daily workouts and exercises to make sure that we return the crew member back to the same kind of functioning that they had before the mission started. And so with respect to the 1-year mission, usually what we see is crew members, as I described before, they're in a state of change, and their abilities are improving all the time from landing point forward. I anticipate that even though he's been in space for a year, that we'll still probably need that full 45 days. And we do have the latitude, in the case that a little bit more time is required for the rehab process, we can extend that if necessary. But I anticipate that it'll look in many ways similar to the 6-month experiences that most of the station astronauts have.
All right. Well, again, Dr. Stevan Gilmore, the lead flight surgeon for Scott Kelly's 1-year mission, getting ready to come home in just under 2 weeks. Thanks so much for joining me on Console. Good luck over there in Kazakhstan. Pack a jacket. I know it's going to be cold, but best of luck.
Thank you very much. I certainly will.